everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Fall's coming and it's almost boot season, so I am going to show you today how to crochet my essential boot cuffs. It's a basic pattern, super easy to adjust, and I'll talk more about that when we get farther on into the video. The pattern itself is for youth to adult, and like I said, it's super easy to adjust to bigger or smaller sizes. And you can find this free crochet pattern on my blog, and I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. To make our boot cuff, you're going to need some number 5 chunky yarns. This pattern is written for chunky number 5 yarns. You're going to need about 4 ounces, and you can use 2 ounces of variegated like we did in here, and 2 ounces of the solid like we did at the bottom and the top of our boot cuffs. The colors, of course, are up to you. I'm going to be using Soft Essential Stripes for the center section, and then this sort of rose color for the top and the bottom. This one is called Pixie Stripe, and then this one is Rose. And so I'm going to be using these 2 colors together on my boot cuffs. And again, you're going to need a total of about 4 ounces to make 2 boot cuffs. We're going to be stitching today with our J hook. The J hook is a 6.0 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need a needle to weave in your ends and then your scissors. We're going to be starting with the bottom band of our boot cuff. We'll do the center section and then the top. Now, if you make the boot cuff according to the pattern, you're going to get a boot cuff that's about 10 inches around and about 8 inches long. And keep in mind, this is very stretchy. And when you wear something made of yarn, sometimes it can loosen up. But to adjust it, if you want to make it a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, you can adjust that by the beginning band. And remember that 4 rows equal about 1 inch. It just depends on how tightly you stitch. And so what I recommend is if you want to adjust the size, you'll do that in the rows, and we're going to get ready to do that, and I'll explain that more as we go. And then everything else will lay out fine as long as you adjust by 4 rows. So we're starting with our solid color, or whatever color you have chosen to start with. We'll make our slip knot, and then we'll chain 11. There's our 11 chains. Now we're going to turn and we're going to stitch a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. Don't count the loop on your hook. You've got 1 chain. Here's your second one. Go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through both loops. And then we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of the chains across. We started with a chain 11. We began our single crochets in the second chain from the hook. So we're going to have 10 single crochets. There's my 10 single crochets. I'm going to chain 1 and turn. For row 2, we're going to be stitching single crochets, but we're going to put those single crochets in the back loop. All right, so let's look at the top of our stitches. You'll notice there's a front loop, which is the loop that's facing you, and then there's back loops, and these are the loops that are facing away. And we're going to start with the first stitch because our chain 1 does not count as a stitch. So we'll go in the first back loop, and stitch a single crochet, and then we'll stitch one single crochet in each of those single crochets across, stitching in the back loop only. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 single crochets, stitching in the back loop only, chain one and turn. Now what we're going to do is for the next 26 rows is we're going to repeat what we did for row 2. We'll go to the first stitch, stitching in the back loop only, and stitch one single crochet in each single crochet across, stitching in the back loop only, and we're going to repeat row 22 for 26 rows, and that's going to give us a total of 28 rows. Ten single crochets, stitching in the back loops only, chain one and turn and repeat. I've repeated row 2 26 more times, so now I have 28 rows. And I want to show you, if you take your tape measure and measure 4 rows equal approximately 1 inch. And this is where you can adjust your size. If you want your cuff, this is the part that goes on your leg at the bottom, to be more rows longer, you can add 4 rows per inch. If you want to make it maybe for a smaller child, you can add or subtract less rows, or add less rows, or subtract rows until it's the length that you want. All right? So now what we're going to do is we did our last row here, which is row 28, chain one and turn. And we're actually going to do one more row. So we'll go right in that first stitch, and we're going to stitch a row of single crochets in the back loops only. And this will be row 29. We're going to chain one, and now we're going to place the two ends together, and this is to form the cuff. All right, there we go. We're going to go in the first stitch on this side, going through both loops. Then we'll go through the first stitch on this side, going through both loops. We'll pull it through and finish our single crochet. And we're going to have 10 stitches across. Get that extra tail out of the way. There we go. And we'll go across, stitching it together, stitching single crochets, going through the stitches on this side and the stitches on this side, and stitch a single crochet. There we go. There's our last single crochet and chain one. So now we have a tube or a cuff for our boot cuff. Now what we're going to do for row 30 is we're going to stitch single crochets around the top of our cuff. And what we'll be doing is we'll stitch one single crochet in the top edge of the first row. Then we'll stitch a single crochet in the top of the next indentation. The way that the cuff works is you have indentations and you have ridges, and we'll be putting a stitch in each indentation and each ridge, and we need a total of 29 single crochets because we have 29 rows. And on this pattern we're not counting our join row here as a row. And make sure when you're stitching in the ends that you're not going in the holes but in the stitches themselves. So here's the top of my ridge, and I'll stitch my single crochet. Here's the indentation. I'm not going to go in that hole. I'm going to go between those two stitches at the end, because if you go in that hole of those indentations and ridges, you'll end up with little holes at the top of at the top edge of your boot cuff. And you don't want there to be like little holes as you go along. You want it to look nice and smooth as you move around the top. Alright, so I'm going to finish stitching a row of single crochets all the way around the top of my boot cuff. And you need to have a total of 29 single crochets. I've stitched that row of single crochets all the way around the top of my cuff. I'm going to join to the first single crochet with a slip stitch. Only I'm not going to chain one or two or anything. I'm going to cut my yarn, and that's because I'm changing colors. If you're not changing colors, don't cut your yarn. I'm going to bring in my variegated that I'm going to use for the center section of my boot cuff. So here is that yarn. I'm going to join it in, snug it down, and chain 2. The chain 2 counts as a half double crochet. We're going to stitch a half double crochet in this next stitch. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through all 3 of those loops and chain 1. We're going to skip the next single crochet and place 2 half double crochets in the next single crochet. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over and go through all 3 loops. And then we'll stitch a second half double crochet in the same stitch and chain 1. We'll skip the next half double crochet and stitch 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. Chain 1, and we'll repeat this all the way around our boot cuff. Two half double crochets, chain 1, skip 1, 2 half double crochets in the next, chain 1, skip 1, 2 half double crochets in the next. And we'll continue to do this all the way around till we reach back to that first chain 2. I've stitched my sets of 2 half double crochet, chain 1 all the way around, and when you get to the end you're going to notice that you have 2 single crochets, not just 1. We're going to go ahead and skip those. You've done 2 half double crochets, chain 1, and we're going to join to the top of the chain 3 with a slip stitch and chain 2. All right, so we ended up with 2 instead of 1 at the end, and that's totally fine. It doesn't hurt anything. We just go ahead and join and chain 2. All right, so now we're going to start our repeat of the center section. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to yarn over. We're going to go in that chain 1 space and stitch a second half double crochet and chain 1. Our chain 2 counted as our first half double crochet, and there's our second. And now we're going to place 2 half double crochets in the chain 1 space. And chain 1. And we'll work our way around the cuff, stitching 2 half double crochets in each of the chain 1 spaces and a chain 1 in between. So 2 half double crochets, chain 1, and repeat, working all the way around our cuff. Two half double crochets, chain 1 in the chain 1 spaces, working all the way around our cuff. I completed this row of 2 half double crochets, chain 1 in each of the chain 1 spaces. Here's my last one. I'm going to join with a slip stitch, chain 2, and then we'll stitch another half double crochet right in this first chain 1 space, chain 1, and this is the way that row 32 is worked. And what we're going to do is we're going to repeat this row, which is row 32, for 7 more rows. 2 half double crochets in the chain 1 spaces, chain 1, 2 half double crochet, chain 1 in each of the chain 1 spaces, working all the way around, joining back to our chain 2, and we're repeating row 32 for 7 more rows. Just to repeat, we're repeating row 32 for 7 more rows, so we have a total of 9 of these rows of the 2 half double crochet, chain 1 in the chain 1 spaces. I've completed those rows. We repeated row 32 7 more times, so we have a total of 9 rows of the 2 half double crochet, chain 1 rows. All right, now I'm going to cut my yarn, and I'm going to bring back in my pink color that I used for this portion. There we go. I'm going to chain 3. We're going to place a double crochet in each of the half double crochets and the chain 1 spaces. Our chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and we're going to place a double crochet in the next half double crochet. Then we'll place a double crochet in the chain 1 space. Then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in the 2 half double crochets and 1 double crochet in the chain 1 space. And we will do this working all the way around the top of our boot cuff. And this is just going to give us a solid row of double crochet stitches. One double crochet in the next 2 half double crochets, and 1 double crochet in the chain 1 space, working all the way around the top of our boot cuff, and we'll join back to our chain 3. I've completed this row of double crochets. I'm back around where I did my chain 3. I'm going to join to the top of my chain 3 with a slip stitch and chain 3. Now on this row, we're going to be alternating double crochets and front post double crochets. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We're going to yarn over and we're going to go around the post of the stitch. Normally we stitch up here in the top loops, but we're going to stitch around the front post of the next double crochet. We're still stitching a double crochet, we're just putting it in a different place. Alright, so now we'll go to the next double crochet and stitch a regular double crochet. Then we'll skip over and do the next double crochet in the front post. And this is going to give us a band at the top that is stretchy and will stay up on our leg. Although when you wear it with boots, the boots normally hold the boot cuff in place. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm stitching a double crochet, then I'm stitching a front post double crochet in the next stitch, and you can see how that looks. Here's a regular front post, regular front post, regular front post, alternating where I'm placing my double crochets. Double crochet, front post, double crochet, double crochet, front post, double crochet. And we'll repeat this working all the way around the top of our boot cuff. I've completed this row of alternating regular double crochets with front post double crochets. Here's my last front post, and I'm going to join to the top of my chain 3, again with a slip stitch and chain 3. And now this is our last row, and all we're going to do is just repeat what we did on the previous row. Front post in the front post, double crochet in the double crochet, front post, double crochet, front post, and regular double crochet. Super easy, right? So we're just going to repeat alternating regular double crochets and front post double crochets, working around the top of our boot cuff and joining back to our chain 3, and then we'll be done and we can tie off and tidy up our ends. I've completed that last row of regular double crochets alternating with the front post double crochets. I've joined to my chain 3 with a slip stitch like we did on the previous row, and now I'm going to cut my yarn. I'm going to go in the next stitch and pull the loop to the inside and tie that off. And now it looks a lot neater on the outside. Alright, so we're just going to grab our needle, and I've got a needle with a little bit of a bigger eye because this is a chunky 5 yarn. Alright, and so we need to tidy it up. We need to go through a few stitches and a little bit of the fibers of the yarn. And when I'm doing something that has a cuff like this, I like to go down just a little bit farther off the top so that that's not affected by my weaving the yarn in or leaving the ends, just in case it might come out. This yarn is just a little bit slippy, and so I'm trying really hard to go through some of those fibers because that's going to help it stay put a lot better. So here are our 2 boot cuffs matching. The stripes aren't exactly the same, but I'm okay with that because I like a little randomness in my projects. And remember, the best way to get a good fit is to measure as you go. You may want them shorter or wider. Measure as you go and adjust as needed.